Hi everyone and welcome back to One Autistic Person. This is the 27th video in a 50 video series that I'm doing going through the statements of the autism quotient, which is often used as a pre-screening tool as part of the assessment process for autism. When I was going through the diagnosis process, I realised that as part of the diagnosis process, you have to look at the traits and the sort of lived experience of autistic people as a deficit. It's required for them to be seen as a deficit to gain a diagnosis. And I wanted to sort of flip that narrative and look at whether we can think of things as a benefit or as a positive. And if we aren't able to find positives or a benefit from it, that we'll look at mitigation and adjustments that can be put in place. My idea with these videos is that people share their own lived experience as autistic people in the comments with each other, as well as me saying how I do things and how I make those mitigations and adjustments, and also if I see things as a positive, but to be a community of autistic people sharing life experiences and adjustments with each other. So this is the 27th, as I say, statement on the autism quotient, which is, I find it easy to read between the lines when someone is talking to me. Now, I've said on this one, it is slightly disagree. And the reason why I slightly disagree to this rather than definitely disagree, because it is something that that happens with me quite often. I really do struggle with this. I do struggle with sort of working out people's intentions if it's not direct. I can do it with people close to me, and sort of probably 50% of the time I can sort of read between the lines with people if I know them well. So I'll be able to pick up on little nuances, but I do struggle in general picking up on those nuances with people. So I couldn't in good conscience say definitely disagree if I can do it sometimes. So like with all the videos that I've done recently, I'm going to separate these into sections. And the first section that I'm going to do for this video is to look at kind of what this looks like and kind of what happens in that situation when I am struggling to read between the lines. So like with all of these videos, this is my lived experience and my experience of how this statement affects my life as an autistic person, but each person's journey with autism is different. So this is my version of things as I feel they are. So I feel like I take a lot of things literally, which makes this quite difficult. Reading between the lines when you take things literally is extremely difficult, because by the very nature of having to read between the lines, you're not looking at what somebody's literally said, but what somebody is implying. And that kind of means that because I also believe what somebody says to me. If somebody says, I'm feeling this way, I'm okay, I will automatically think they're okay. If they say something, I believe that thing they said. I don't understand the nuances of things. I really do take things at face value when people tell me something. My natural response is to go, okay, you're fine, that's great. And I personally don't hold back on things. So if I'm feeling a certain way, I will say that I'm feeling that way. I will just automatically say it. I don't necessarily think about how that's going to affect somebody else, because I don't think that my feelings, the way that I feel about something, is going to necessarily affect somebody. But it may mean that that changes that interaction to make it easier for both of us, for me to communicate with the person and for them to communicate with me. I also do really struggle with ambiguity. If something's ambiguous, if something's not clear, I will go to the easiest option. My brain will automatically go, oh, well, that's what it is. And I don't like ambiguity. I don't like not knowing the truth behind something and knowing the real reason behind something. And I don't sort of seek it out. And I do seek out what people are actually feeling, and I want people to tell me, but I will automatically assume that what they're telling me is the truth, it's correct, and it's full. And my brain doesn't kind of consider that somebody's okay with being ambiguous when they're saying something, because I'm not ambiguous in the way that I speak. But I'd say the biggest problem that I have with this is more to do with the use of metaphors and idioms. People use metaphor and idioms a lot when they are trying to communicate how they feel about something, when they are trying to tell you something. And I think it's a sort of trying to make things easier to understand. And a lot of people do find this easier to understand. And people, if they understand metaphor and understand idioms, then it does actually make it easier to do it. And it kind of means that you don't have to be direct while telling somebody something. Metaphor I get a lot more, but I get very lost in it, and people tend to go into multiple metaphors or mixing metaphors, and it becomes very complicated, and I have to understand where their thought process was to begin with, and then them go into telling me, and then I have to think of things in a sort of a way that's not direct. Again, it's the directness. It's not directly saying this is what it is. It's kind of going, oh, I feel like this thing, and if I don't understand what that thing is, or if I feel differently about that thing, I'm not going to get it. And with idioms, I often find them really complicated. I think they're very unclear, and I often think I understand what an idiom is, or what an idiom means, but actually I get it wrong, and I get the wrong end of the stick. I am just aware of the fact that I've just said an idiom there with wrong end of the stick. So I apologise for that. Yeah. So what I want to do is have a quick look at an idiom, and then talk about the reason why this is so complicated. And it kind of, for me, gives a good view of it, because I have to understand, to be able to accept an idiom being used, I have to understand its origins, because they often aren't exactly what you'd think they're going to be. So I will research an idiom, and once I understand where that idiom comes from, and what it actually means, I may use that idiom myself, and also I will be able to understand when somebody's using it. But I wanted to have a look at this one specifically, because when I've been doing some research into idioms, this one came across as one that it makes sense why they're so complicated. So here is a little look at an idiom. So as you'll have seen from the little graphic that I just put up, the idiom that I'm going to have a look at is blood is thicker than water. And the general understanding of the meaning of this idiom is that family relationships and loyalties are the strongest and most important ones. Now, if we have a look at the origin of this idiom, I'm going to read it out word for word of what the origin is that I could find. So, even though many might think this saying means that we should put family ahead of friends, it actually meant the complete opposite. The full phrase actually was, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb, and it referred to warriors who shared the blood they shed in battle together. These blood brothers were said to have stronger bonds than biological brothers. You can see already why that's complicated. For me, the older version of this, the origin of this, makes more sense. I find that I have stronger bonds with people generally who I've chosen to be in my life than I do with the people that were in the family that I was born into. So it actually makes more sense to me in that sense. So this idiom never made a huge amount of sense to me, because I don't think that in the common use of it now that's necessarily true for me personally. So it wasn't relative to me, because I have stronger bonds with people who are not who I'm not related to. I couldn't understand where water and blood came into it. I now do understand that. But also the context of this has changed over time. So I think this is where the problem comes in, is that there's a lot of processing to go on to think about what that could potentially mean, and it could mean different things to different people. And if someone's using this idiom to explain something to me, I may get the wrong end of the stick on it. I may completely misunderstand it. I may take it as the original sense of it, and then get it completely wrong and think that somebody's actually saying they're not close to me when they're actually saying they are close to me. So I'm not able to read between the lines. So I literally take things literally. So for me, that this would mean the opposite of what somebody may think it would mean, and the confusion begins, and I get completely the wrong story on it, and will make decisions on my thought process based on it. Now, I'm going to leave a link in the description of a website that goes through sort of the origins of quite a few different idioms, and I think it's quite useful to be able to look at that. So, and it's also interesting. So I'll pop that into the description for you. So now I've had a look at that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a look at, for me personally, again, with all these videos, it's about my personal experience, my personal lived experience. I've sort of considered why I feel this happens in my life and why I struggle so much with reading between the lines. So For me, there are quite a few different reasons that I think this affects me, and the first one really is quite an obvious one, I think, for a lot of people who are autistic, and it's reading social cues. I find it difficult to read all different kinds of social cues, but I certainly find it very difficult to read body language. I find it extremely difficult, which means I have what people say to me. I literally have, and I also I find it difficult with tone of voice and things like that. I don't notice the little changes in tone of voices, micro changes in people's behaviour. I don't pick up on those things. So I literally have the words people say, and that's all, folks. There's no more information that I can take from it apart from those specifically what somebody has said to me. And on the back of that, I kind of looked into some studies in relation to this kind of thing, and studies have shown that up to 90% of social interactions are non-verbal, so they're not to do with what the actual words that people say. A study by somebody called Albert Merebian. I keep getting that wrong. I'm really sorry that I keep pronouncing it incorrectly. Albert Merebian, who was a body language researcher, and he first broke down the components of face-to-face conversation. And he found that 55% of a social interaction was non-verbal. It wasn't anything to do with what the person was saying or the tone of voice. It was their body language. It was micro behavioural changes, facial expressions, that kind of thing. All of those things were sort of constituted 55% of a social interaction. And another 38% were vocal changes, were the things that were related to the actual noise coming out of somebody's mouth. So that includes things like tone of voice. And then only 7% are the actual words that somebody's saying. So if you're focusing just on what the words are that somebody says, you can see straight away that you're only focusing potentially on 7% of what somebody's intention is behind communication, and missing out a whole 93% of the rest of that communication. So you can see where those issues arise, and it really resonated with me, that, because I'm missing out on such a huge part. 93% of anything is a huge amount of something. So I'm going to put a link to that study, or the information on that study, in the description as well, because it's a really interesting read. It's quite a big read, but it's quite interesting. Also, I value honesty. I'm not saying people are not being honest, but I kind of need people to not be vague with me and not to skirt around issues just to make me feel better. I would rather somebody be honest, because trust is really difficult for me. I struggle trusting in general, and as much as somebody isn't intending to, my brain will automatically see that what my brain sees as dishonest or not being fully direct and fully open with me about something, it will chip away at that trust slightly, and I would end up not trusting anybody if there was no directness ever, and I do then struggle even further with with trust issues. So yeah, I need to feel honesty in things, and directness, and it's kind of a self-protection thing, so that I don't end up feeling like I can't trust anyone. And then on the flip side of it, sort of on the opposite side, direct communication is an issue for many people. I have kind of noticed, for various reasons, social directness can be seen as a negative, and it's quite a pushed on learnt behaviour that we are told from quite a young age to sort of skirt around things and make things easier for people when you're saying things, and it kind of becomes a masking technique for everybody. And this is across the board. It doesn't matter whether you are neurotypical, whether you're neurodivergent. It really doesn't matter. This we all do it. I do it to an extent as well. That's the thing. As much as I'm saying I don't do it, there are times when I do it. And I think we're told that it's better to skirt around issues, but actually my brain just does not deal with it very well and gets it so confused. I'd rather be direct. So yeah, I think that's a major problem. So when these two things happen, when people are skirting around it because they think they're doing the right thing, so they think they're doing the right thing, and I think I'm doing the right thing by taking people by face value, those two things then are really difficult for me to be able to read between the lines. So that's why I kind of think that these things happen for me personally. So what I'm going to do now is have a look at some of the positives and negatives that come from this, because I feel like there is a positive and there are some negatives to it. So let's have a look at both of those things. So positives and negatives. The positive is that I believe people, I believe that believing people is a good thing. And once people know that they can be direct with you and that they can be open with you about things, then actually it builds a better relationship in the long term. I think it can make it quite difficult at the beginning, but once that is established and people realise that they can come to you and say that something, that be direct with you, then actually it builds a better relationship. And believing somebody straight away when they are being open and direct with you and not questioning that is a really positive thing. And I found that it then does really build a good relationship. It does rely on some of the mitigations and adjustments that I'll talk about in a second, but I do see it overarchingly as a positive to believe people at face value. The negatives are getting it wrong can become a barrier between me and the other person, as they think that they have made it clear and that I should pick up on it, and I haven't picked up on it. And for me, it isn't clear. So it can build a barrier because people get confused by the fact that I'm not understanding that. And another thing, that this is kind of something, again, that I've worked on with my mitigations, that's meant that this doesn't happen as much, but it still does happen, but it doesn't happen to the same extent. So I can ask over and over again if someone is okay, and often don't trust that a person is okay. So I worry about the person and my interactions with them, which can then lead me to become frustrating to the other person. So I become frustrating to the other person, to the point where in the past I've kind of become obsessive with it. And I'm obsessed that I've done something wrong in that situation because I've picked up something is wrong, but I've not been able to work out what it is. Which has then meant that person has gone, I can't be dealing with you as a person, and end up losing that friendship. So it's added to a lot of that sort of feeling of not being able to communicate even more, because then I've gone, well, obviously I got that wrong, and then I've pushed that person away, and I've become frustrating and annoying. So that was when I was younger, that happened quite a lot, that I became quite obsessed with the fact that I had upset somebody, even if I hadn't, because my brain's going, there's something not, because I wasn't able to pick up on what that body language meant, but I picked up that there was a body language issue, and then it spirals, and then overthinking and obsessing. But we'll have a look at that in a second. I'm just going to go now move over to have a look at what some of the mitigations and adjustments are that I put in place in relation to struggling to read between the lines. So these are some of the mitigations and adjustments that I put in place for this specifically. And as with everything in these videos, they are my lived experience. I'm only sharing these with you so that they may help if you feel that they will. So I hope they do. If you are struggling with this, so I now ask for clarity from the person. So I'll say something along the lines of, is there something wrong? Is there anything wrong? And please feel free to tell me if there is. I'm quite happy for you to be open with me. I don't want. I'd hate to think that I've upset you, and I'd like to help if I can. If it's something that it's a relation to helping somebody, I'm here if you need me. Those kind of things. So opening the floor up so that you're making it so that social interaction, you're saying to the person, you're putting the ball in their court. Basically, you're saying, I can see there might be something wrong here. I don't want to overthink it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say to you, I think there might be, without really pushing it. Are you sure there isn't anything wrong? I'd rather know if there is. If they then say no, that's then down to them. You've asked them that question, and then that kind of brings me on to the next mitigation, which kind of comes from the point I was making about obsessing and overthinking about it, because of the whole rumination issue that some autistic people have. Which I certainly do have, and I'd say don't focus too much on it. So as long as you have done something along the lines of what I've just said there, you have put the ball in their court. You have said to them, if there is a problem, please tell me, and we can rectify this in some manner. Obviously, that's not the best way of saying it, but one of those things that I was saying, is there anything wrong? Please tell me. I would hate to think that I've upset you. That kind of thing. For me, there's a social agreement there. You have said to somebody, I may have upset you, or I may not have got something right here. I will make sure that I will do something about it. You can give me more information. But if they choose not to, that social agreement is that they're telling you that that's not the case. And the thing is, accept it. Accept the fact that is what they're saying. No, there is nothing more. And don't obsess over it. Unless they tell you otherwise, and they may come back to you later. It doesn't mean they're going to tell you straight away, but you are still opening the door for that to be said. But until they come to you, take it as said. That is it. Take it that is the case. Do not obsess over it. I think quite often as autistic people, because of our history of social interactions and how difficult they can be, and how much we do feel that they're difficult for us, we often blame ourselves for when social interactions go wrong. And I think we have to remind ourselves sometimes they are two-way, and we may need to put those things in people's minds to say, I think that maybe I have got this wrong, or maybe I haven't picked up on something. Come to me and tell me. But I think we always need to ask ourselves, if someone came to me and offered me the chance to clarify after I've said, yes, I'm okay, if I don't truly mean that, if somebody's asked me to clarify it and left that door open for me, and you say no, if I said no to somebody, I'm fine, is it their fault or is it my fault if that person doesn't then know that there is something wrong when in fact you're saying there isn't? And the answer is, it's on the person then who you've given the opportunity to give that response to, from that person who is going to respond to you, the other person in the social situation who you've given the opportunity to. It's on them to tell you if they want that to change. You can only take what somebody tells you as the truth and as the way they are truly feeling. If they're not ready to, that's absolutely fine, but they can't. But nobody can expect you to understand that. So don't beat yourself up over it. Do not take fault from it, and don't accept the fact that you're at fault if you have given them the clarity. And if they come to you, if they come to you later and say, well, you should have known, say, well, I did ask you to I did give you the opportunity to tell me that there was that I'd got it wrong. I apologise that wasn't picked up on, and I apologise that that's the way you feel about it. But I did, I did want to help, and I did want you to tell me how you were truly feeling. And in future, I would really appreciate it if you did, because then we can respond to it sooner. So yeah, it's just remembering that a social interaction is two-way, because I think sometimes we blame ourselves so much that we always think it's on our shoulders when something goes wrong, and it's not always the case. So that's the 27th video, and like I've said with all of these videos, comments are the most important thing for me. Please tell each other how your lived experience is with this, what mitigations and adjustments you put in place, because I think it's really helpful for us as autistic people to share our lived experiences. So I'd like to thank everybody who's been watching these videos, and I really hope that I see you on the next one. Thank you, and bye.